wonderful Dr. Kelli Dunlap. Dr. Dunlap, please say hello.
Hello. Hello, chat.
You guys might know her better as Hey Dr. K. I have shouted her out several times because she's a wonderful human being and she started streaming on Mixer. So please go follow her there. Here's a bunch of links where you guys can find her. She's absolutely phenomenal and I'm so excited.
Oh.
We met at the Toronto what was the mental health summit?
International Games Summit on Mental Health.
Okay, yeah, that's the fancy title. Clearly, I was not doing so good on the full title. Yes. Everybody says hi, Dr. K. Yay, yay, yay. So for those of you guys, this conversation is as awesome as it is because you're participating. So exclamation, the letter Q, and ask your questions as we go along. If they're super relevant, I will kind of insert them into the conversation naturally. If they're not as super relevant, we will get to them. At the end, we have a big Q&A, but we'll definitely talk about everything. So yes, please be sure to check out Dr. K. She's phenomenal. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. So I am a licensed clinical psychologist, which means I have my doctorate in clinical psychology and I have passed licensure. After I got that, I got a master's in game design. And so I am also a game designer. I currently teach at American University in their graduate game design program. So I actually teach game design and games, culture, society, that kind of thing. And yeah, that's me in a small little shell.
You do like 4,000 times more than that, but yeah, but okay. So that sounds like a compact little, like you said, it's a small little package, small little compact. Yeah. But it's a great Chunky Nuts. It is a great, awesome mix of stuff. I agree. So
it's almost as awesome as that name.
Chunky Nuts. So do tell, how did you get into all this gaming stuff? So I guess like you just like video games or something
like that. So I've been playing video games as long as I can remember. I had an older brother, and so of course anything he did I wanted to do too. And so I played my entire life, and it wasn't until college I started studying psychology, and as a true nerd I was in the honors program, and I learned that when you do your senior capstone, the university would give you money to do your research. And so I'm like, I wonder if I can get my university to buy me video games. And so I created a research.
It's a brilliant scheme.
And they did. They bought me 2 video games, which was fantastic. And so that's how I got started. And then obviously, if you have a psychology degree, as I do in undergrad, you quickly realize you can't do anything with an undergrad in psychology. So real talk right there.
Oops.
Yeah. And then so I went into graduate school and pursued my doctorate, and along the whole way just studied games, mostly because back in my day, this is around 2009. Oh my God, it's 10 years ago. Holy cow.
Yeah. It's been a decade. Yeah.
It has. But yeah, all the research at that time was like, games are bad. Games make you violent. Games are terrible for you.
Yeah.
But like all of my favorite college experiences had to do with games. Like I literally met the person I am currently married to because we played video games together on the same floor. And so I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I did. So that was really cool. And then once I finished my doctoral program, that was 5 years. 4 months after I graduated, I went into a 2 years master's program like you do, and to study games from the other side. And yeah, that's the long academic journey of how I got to this intersection of games and mental health.
But that's amazing because there's not a lot. There's literally, you can count you on maybe all of my appendages, maybe like 2, both hands and feet. I'm not sure. There's not a lot of you. That's the point. So that's really cool of you that you decided to do that. You set out to do something that, again, like you said, nobody was doing at the time because it was like all the research was like poo-pooing everything. And what's interesting is people talk about the fact that like everything moves so fast and research isn't fast enough, but then like comparatively research isn't fast enough to how like the media is running. But at the same time, the media is still way behind and blaming video games based on research from way back then that is like no longer relevant. But that's yeah.
I mean, the fun thing about that is this idea of something that the youth enjoy that's entertaining,
Yeah.
like you can date that back to Socrates and Plato, like super dead guys that were complaining
Super dead guys.
5,000 years ago, kids today with their pencils, and it seriously can be, you can track it all the way back. I have an entire talk about the culture of like moral panic and why video games have gotten targeted.
Maybe I've written an article about it for Take This. maybe that's being edited. Maybe.
I totally didn't see that.
Yeah, totally. Why would you? But yeah, no, okay, yeah. Moral panic. It's a thing, but I feel like we're having a very mental health is a higher conversation now slowly because it's been inappropriately mentioned in the media by people who have a lot of influence over what happens in the media, meaning influential. How do I put this without saying anything? People who are really important politically say stupid stuff and then it goes in the media and then people believe it. That's a problem. Yes. Yeah. Pac-Man makes me rage, man, right? To the point where you like go and kill people. I understand. Or eat them. That's what Pac-Man teaches you to do. It's terrible. It's awful.
I mean, the very first like example of, video games are going to corrupt the youth was actually Death Race in 1976. And it is a black and white Pong-like game where you have like this pixelated race car and you run over these pixelated gremlins. And when you do, a little tombstone like pops up.
Tombstone, sign of the Satan.
There's some really awesome like newspaper clippings about how, people are learning how to be bad drivers and, you are an active participant in vehicular homicide. And I'm not like, there are literally like newspaper clippings. People actually said this kind of stuff.
Oh my God. I do remember when that stuff came out about GTA. I remember that very distinctly, where it was like, our children are learning to go buy hookers and then kill them with cars. And this is terrible. Yeah.
Because that never happened before video games.
No, definitely just not a thing. Yeah. Okay. So the research you talked about, I guess you must have done your doctorate on this since you played two video games sponsored by your university. And I just broke my pen if anybody's wondering what that sound was. Totally.
It's okay. It happens.
It happens. Totally. I just don't know my strength, you guys. Not because I've been fiddling with it for an hour. But yeah, so you must have done some kind of research with the two video games that your university bought for you. So what was the research?
That was for undergrad, actually.
Okay.
There's been a lot of research. For undergrad, I tested whether a more violent game makes somebody more violent. And guess what? No, it doesn't. And what actually was seemed to be a driver of aggression was like bad game design, like having to learn new control schemes, having to figure out levels, having to figure out inventory, like the learning
things that actually make you throw your controller across the room.
Yeah, I literally, one of my participants, because one of the games I played was Halo, an M-rated game.
Oh, Halo. And teaches you to kill aliens.
Familiar with that, and so like you saw her anger and frustration actually go down. And then I had her play, I think it was called like Surf Penguin. It was some E-rated game.
Okay.
And like her anxiety, her frustration and intolerance skyrocketed because every time the penguin died, it like flew at the TV screen and made the TV screen look like it got cracked or whatever. And she's like, I don't like this at all. And so she spiked on the E-game and, went down on, and that was pretty normal for the people in that sample. Is if you were familiar with the game, you actually like chilled. But if you had to learn something new, it was more frustrating. And so you saw an uptick in that kind of thing. And that's interesting. And back in the day, that was pretty like earth-shattering.
No, it is earth-shattering. Okay, we're not downplaying this. It is earth-shattering. We didn't know this at the time because not enough people were getting attention for playing video games, so that's one thing. It is earth-shattering because you proved something that most gamers already knew, right? Like, the two things that make people rage, guys, right? Like, one thing is losing in Smash.
Yep, can confirm.
Right. Or again, the controls suck. Those are the two things that make me so angry that I will curse everybody's mother and then some. But yeah.
It has nothing to do with like the content of the game. It's more about how the game itself is being played or not played.
Yeah. The thing that I've also read the research basically on even the older research on the fact that video games can influence you and change your mood and potentially make you violent says that it basically there is it happens right after you play the game. You might feel a little riled up, but then even at the 5-minute mark, you already have calmed down. But that's not as far as the media took that article. It was basically just talking about the fact that, like, you get kids who watch video games are angry, and then the desensitization to it's the same thing with desensitization to violence. It's the same way. Like 5 minutes later, you're a normal person because that's not what you're focused on.
Yeah, and the tough thing about that is that you have to have an understanding of how this kind of research is done to really get to what you're talking about. So typically, the way it would be set up is you'd bring somebody in, you would have them play a quote unquote violent video game. Usually they between 10 and 20 minutes. There was one study, 2 minutes. They were allowed to play like Tekken or something for only 2 minutes. And then they're removed from the game and have to fill out this survey. Mm-hmm. And so that's a problem number one. Like, there's not very many people who sit down to play a game for only 20 minutes.
Right.
Unless it's maybe a mobile game, but, you know, like, no one sits down and plays GTA for 10 minutes.
Right.
Absolutely not.
Listen, the load screen takes longer than that.
I know, right?
Depending how old your computer is. You're not, if you spent that long booting up the game, you're not going to only play it for 10 minutes and then stop.
And then also, like, how they measure aggression. So, you know, in psychology, we have this thing called ethics, and we're not actually allowed to hurt people or encourage people to hurt other people. And so if we would not be allowed to, by our ethics committees, to say, okay, let's have them play this violent game and then see and encourage them to, like, attack one another, like to show actual aggression. And so what they tend to do are they use abstractions of aggression paradigms. One of the famous ones is the hot sauce test, where after you play the violent video game, you have like 7 different hot sauces, and you get to pick what the person across from you has to drink. And that person across from you is a Confederate, so someone who's in on the study. And the idea is, if the hotter the hot sauce you choose, the more aggressive you are. Yeah, and it has a hard time with replication because people catch on. They're like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. Yeah. Another one is they'll give you like M blank 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 R, and you have to fill in the word. And so if you write the word mother, you are not angry. If you write the word murder, you are aggressive.
And that's based on word associate, like how word associate, which first word comes out of into your mind. And if you're angry, they're all going to be angry words. Yeah. Because sometimes I'm angry and I'm not necessarily using curse words or being like murder. I could just be angry without. So
yeah, it's not. The research-based is not robust, at least in favor of the idea that video games are inherently unto themselves problematic.
So,
now, if you
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking that, like,
me back in.
no. I want you to go out as far as you can, and then if I need to reel you, I'll like yell across the canyon. Don't worry about it. So it sounds like also that a lot of this research is done by people who are already maybe biased in one direction or the other.
Or people who have no idea what they're doing. I have seen so many studies where they're comparing, we compared an M-rated game to a T-rated game. Well, the M-rated game would be something like Gears of War, and the T-rated game would be like Need for Speed. Like, you can't, it's like apples and oranges. I mean, yes, one is more violent than the other, but it's a racing sim versus a third person. You can't even compare a first person shooter to a third person shooter because they're different experiences. And no one ever accounted for, like, if someone had played the game before or not. And it's not a good thing. But around 2009, people like myself who grew up playing games and who like saw all this bad research come out during their undergrad or grad studies started getting into, positions of power to do their own research. And it's around that time you see this change in the literature around people being a lot more measured, people actually comparing things that have, they're both first-person shooters, they both have 3D realistic graphics, they both have the same frame rate, like really getting at like making sure the controller and the button mapping is the same. Like really basic stuff that you need to make sure that you can transfer from one group to another. And what they've been finding is it's not games themselves. Competitive games like competition, us versus them, that does spike aggression, but so does football and so does baseball and any kind of competition. So it's not the game, it's the competitive aspect of the game.
Right. And it's
a lot more nuanced.
Yeah, and somebody brought up, I believe it was our awesome Ken of Two Dogs Games, brought up both at the summit and when I was playing his game live on stream too. But he brought up the fact that, like, you know, when you walk out of like a karate movie or something, or like a super like action-packed movie, you're like, yeah, and like kids will be like, yeah, and I'm like, well, how long did they do that for? Like,
about 5 minutes.
Yeah, and then they're ruined forever because they saw Jackie Chan on screen. That's such a dated ref. I realize Jackie Chan is not like the action hero right now. I'm sorry, guys.
John Wick. You go on a John Wick. You want to rescue puppies and kick in kneecaps.
Hold on. What child is watching John Wick? Can we not? That is. What child?
I have a 3-year-old. It's totally fine.
Okay, but that's different because he's not like, he doesn't know what's going on.
Okay. So let's try to find a child friendly. Like,
is there one?
Well, one thing I always like to point out,
Iron Man and stuff, right? They're child friendly.
Oh, he's not watching Iron Man.
No,
not yet. Give him time.
Sure.
But no, America itself is just so engrossed in violence. Like, yeah. Speaking of my son, like, I read Cat in the Hat to him pretty frequently, and in Cat in the Hat Comes Back, the things have guns. They're little top guns, and they shoot the spots. But I'm like, we are so desensitized to the idea of guns just being everywhere that they're literally in children's books. So funny. I always find it a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Hypocritical.
Sure.
Like, oh, games here bad, you know, oh, Lego, good, wholesome fun, you know, because you're like shooting Legos at people, but
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
into something else, and yeah.
Celestial V says maybe Power Rangers. Is that still on, or is that another dated reference?
I think it's kind of dated. I mean, they kind of just go on and on.
Did they like I feel like they relaunched them recently.
I mean, they've probably done so many times. The Ninja Turtles.
Ninja Turtles, that is violence at its finest. I mean, have you seen them scarf down those pizzas? A lot of pizzas were lost in the Great Ninja Turtle sacrifices.
Yep. Yeah. And now all kids want to live in sewers and eat pizza.
Yeah, that's what happens. And be friends with giant rats.
Yep.
Confirmed. Dangerous stuff. Including your 3-year-old. He's lining up, but he's at the sewer right now. That's why he's not home sleeping in bed. My kid watched the old and the new ones on Netflix. I did not know that, Celestial. Thank you. That's the thing. Yeah, nursery rhymes were violent. Older versions of video games, again, really no violence in them. No. Yeah. They had a season last year. Currently working on another. Oh, see, I figured they'd revamp it. And then Magic School Bus. That's violent. They go up children. That's terrifying. They go inside of children.
Yeah. We're just so socialized, at least in this country, to just roll with it, that it's funny that they take exception to it. Like, I personally think someone running over fictional prostitutes in GTA is a lot less harmful than 300-pound men slamming their heads against each other repeatedly, 16 games this season every single year, and
until they're concussed.
So they have concussion and traumatic brain injury, and many of them end up, having severe mental health issues later in life, like dementia or, suicidal ideation, things like that, because of the traumatic brain injury. But what do I know, right?
No, what do you, specifically you? Oh my God. It's like we're taught from an early age that entertainment is when there is conflict and someone wins and someone loses. It's like that's what happens. Interesting. I like all of your theories, everybody. They will be immediately dismissed. No, I'm kidding. This is you're incredible. Okay, so you're so incredible that I'm thrown off guard. The fact that sport endorses 300-pound men at all is an issue. It teaches kids that being a huge overweight bully is acceptable. That's an interesting opinion. Huh. That's an interesting opinion. So when it comes to mental, like all of this is of course coming back, bringing it all back to mental health. And you kind of touched upon this on your recent lunch stream. So by the way, you guys, if you follow her, she does random lunch education streams. I enjoyed the heck out of that, just saying.
Yeah, I'm so glad.
Yeah, that was awesome. I definitely couldn't be as active as I would be in a normal stream, but it was like really great because I was like eating and I was learning a thing. I really loved it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, next question is bringing it back to mental health. So all of these things, we're talking about the fact that like all of these things in some way are not the best for our mental health, and yet video games are pushed out as the thing that is the scapegoat, right? Of all these things, video games are the worst. The point is not that, of course, the point is not that like football is bad and all movies are bad. We're not here to like blame everything. We're here to point out the absurdity of the fact that like everything has a positive and a negative to it, but you can't just like pick one thing. Everything is a lot more nuanced. You can't just pick one thing and say, oh, this is it. All of world's problems are on this thing. And that's kind of, yeah. In my opinion, if someone can understand the difference between violence and video games and not reacting in a day-to-day life, I'm fine with it. Yeah. Yes. Slime Weezy, have you both struggled with mental health as well? That's a great question. So I've been in therapy for about 10 years now. I live with depression, anxiety, and ADHD. Is that okay if we ask you that same question?
Sure. So I have anxiety.
I like that you laughed.
It's something that I don't typically talk about.
Yeah.
Which always to me is this huge thing of cognitive dissonance, because I want to destigmatize mental health and mental illness. I'm a practicing clinician. Like I know these things, and I know that there's nothing like, it's like making some fun of someone for wearing glasses. Like these help me see better, and guess what? My medication does the same thing too.
Yeah. But these are okay, but your medication is not okay.
Yeah, or if I had like bronchitis, I would take antibiotics and nobody would care.
Right.
But my brain chemistry is off a little bit, and so I take care of it. So I typically don't. I'm trying to be better about it.
Yeah. No, but I mean I don't either, because there's also a little bit of superhero complex, just a teeny bit, but also a little bit of like if I expose myself of potentially having some kind of an issue, then do I have to go on a ramble explaining that like, no, but I get this stuff, which is why I can still talk about it, and I'm actually talking about my experience, and I'm not trying to prescribe you anything or tell you what you need to do, because I'm an advocate, and you can't prescribe anything to anybody or tell them what to do because you don't know them personally and you're not treating them and all that stuff. So you have to like go into that whole thing. I feel like if you are in the public eye and talking about mental health, like there's a bunch of
and I mean honestly, like the reason that I wanted to talk about it more is because of you in particular, and Dr. B as well, of just being very open, and the notorious EGB, Emily Grace Buck, being very open about their own issues and how people respond to that and seen and validated. And that happens when I do one-on-one therapy. Mm-hmm. Like I draw so much on my own experience with anxiety and my own experience with depression. Like I see you, I get you. I don't know what you're feeling, but I know what it's like for me when I'm in that dark hole. Mm-hmm. Or I know what it's like for me when I'm in a room full of people and it's loud and all I want to do is escape. Mm-hmm. And so it's not going to be the exact same as your experience, but I have an idea of that sensation. I know what anxiety is like for me and what depression is like for me.
Yeah.
These are things that have helped me. They may help you, they may not.
Yeah.
But one, you're seen, you're validated, you have value, you are not your diagnosis. And yeah, let's talk about it. Let's get it out there. And make it not something to be ashamed of or fear. Like I'm definitely not ashamed. I think there's still that fear component.
Yes.
Like the stats are, there's still like 56% of Americans wouldn't want to live next door to somebody with a mental illness.
Oh.
And I'm like, well, honey, 1 in 5 Americans any year has a mental illness, and 1 in 2 people, of course, the course of their lifetime will have a mental illness. So you probably are.
Right.
You just don't know it because of these stereotypes and these stigmas around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, wait, you have something behind you that says a phrase that we use quite a bit here, especially our moderator Blifflesplick loves using it. If you can't make your own neurotransmitters, store-bought is fine. Yes, we've repeated that quite a few times. It's awesome. Okay, let's go. Let's. I have more questions for you, but I want to. Some of the ones in the audience are really topical, so I would rather ask them first. Okay, so the first person is first person asks, Professional EXP asks, how are video games good for your mental health?
So I think it's dangerous to say that anything is inherently good or bad for your mental health. It's going to vary by person, where they're at, what they need, what they're struggling with. However, based on the research that I've done and others have done, if you're using games to connect with others, to feel masterful, to feel like, yes, I accomplished something, to have that high of an epic win when you take down a final battle or you capture that flag. And largely if you're using video games as a way to socially connect with others, with your peers, with friends, make new friends, there's really nothing negative about that. And that can in fact be helpful. It can be stress reducing. Again, social connectivity is super important for everyday health, especially if you struggle with something like depression, which tends to be socially isolating, or any kind of anxiety disorder that makes you a little bit more socially isolated. So it really depends on how you use it. So what you're using and how you use it. Obviously, video games can be used to excess, and there can be problematic use of them, the same way you can do anything to excess. I always like to say, too much water and we drown, too much food and we die, like too much oxygen and we suffocate. Anything done to excess is excessive. And so I think video games they're a medium for us to get our needs met. And so if we're getting our needs met while we're playing, and it's in balance with getting our needs met outside of the virtual space as well, then it's a perfectly healthy, it's a pastime, the same way you would read a book or do a crossword puzzle. It's just a little more tech.
Yeah. I've literally heard there was one guy I worked with who was like, we don't like our kids. We have the Xbox because it has a Kinect, but we don't like our kids playing video games otherwise. And I was like,
okay.
Yeah.
You do you. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
My son likes to play Elder Scrolls Blades with me on my phone because it's tap interface, and so he gets to tap as we're walking down things. And if I put the difficulty on like 1 and I'm like a level 26 or whatever, there's like, I'm gonna get the goblin, and he's like taps at it. Mommy, I got the goblin.
Yeah. Thank you for getting the goblin. I appreciate it. Thank you for helping.
This is a kid, like, he will literally sit on my lap and play with me. This is a kid that does not sit still for anything.
Yeah.
So like I'm sitting there like, my baby is sitting still with me.
Yeah. I get to hug him while he's playing terrible video games.
I know.
So, but what about, so video games don't always, wait. I have so many questions, but I do want to go back to our queue. Okay, next question. Have you heard that there are people in the military that are researching using the Tetris effect in games to help reduce PTSD after live fire conflicts? Tetris effect reprograms short-term memory so they don't dream of days of conflict.
Yes.
Tell me about this. I don't know about this.
So obviously, this can be used for soldiers or anybody experiencing PTSD. It doesn't have to be combat veterans.
Yeah.
But there is a really interesting study out there about how it was used with combat veterans, where within 20 minutes of having some kind of traumatic event, what they found is that soldiers who played Tetris were half as likely to develop PTSD symptoms down the line. And this kind of goes into the idea, the neuropsychology brainy bits of how trauma impacts our brains and our memories. So, our memories are not like video recorders. They're more like, I don't even know. They're not perfect, and they're kind of what we can recollect and piece together of what makes sense. But there's a visual component to that. And so when you re-experience something, whether it's like a flashback or if you just are even thinking about a memory, like if you were to think about a memory right now, you would probably have an image come to mind. There would be,
I had PTSD, so yeah, I feel that.
And even if you haven't, like just that's the way our brains process memories, is by thinking about, things visually as well as sound, smells, all that kind of stuff. But what they found, or what they assume, is that because Tetris is such a visuospatial heavy game, that it prevented that visualization from being encoded in memory storage. So basically, imagine if you were playing Tetris. So if you're playing Tetris and you're trying to remember a memory of something else.
Oh, I can't. I can barely talk while I play Tetris. Right?
Yeah, you can, because it's such a demand on your brain.
Yeah.
for the rotation, the visual spatial orientation, and like the physical motor component, that basically it just doesn't allow the trauma to get encoded, or severely less of it to be encoded.
That is so freaking cool. So when you're talking about what do video games do well for health, there you go. Yeah. Celestial V, now I want to play Tetris 99. that is, Tetris 99 is life for me. Like, I have spent hours just sitting there, and I have gotten as far as 2. I've never gotten 1 since the game came out. And I've played fairly, I don't know how many hours I've put into that game, but yeah. Anyway, it's one of my favorite jams. It's actually one of the few games where, so normally if I'm playing a video game, I'll call my husband over because I suck at platforming. And I'll be like, can you do the thing? I can't do the thing. It sucks. I hate this. Everything, the mechanics are terrible. And he's like, and he just does it. And I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. But when it comes to Tetris, I'm actually the one helping him sometimes. But it's not just Tetris they're using now. Most combat zones are putting in game rooms for incoming combatants so that they can distress, based on the same research, says Tally. I've heard that, and I've heard that they will use, that soldiers that have animals that they can encounter, like either after combat or as a way to unwind. So like soldiers that work with dogs even are less likely to experience PTSD. Then it's fascinating. But yeah, we're on the topic of video games. I'm sorry. Just anytime I can bring up dogs, I'm going to bring up dogs. I'm sorry.
You do not have to apologize to me. You know my situation. So.
There's a lot of dogs.
There's a lot of dogs.
Okay. All right. So last question from the audience for now. That girl Bryce asked, what type of topics do you specialize in counseling?
So I like to specialize in anxiety and depression, oddly enough, because, I seem to have I think we have a knack for connecting with people who are struggling with those kinds of things. But I also really like to do more experiential type of psychotherapy. So I'm really into bringing in usually geek culture, but games, videos, movies, books, stuff that people genuinely care about. And even when they're in like their pit, something that still brings them joy, and then somehow working that into the therapy. So if you were to ask my professional Dr. Kelli self, I would say I'm a CBT clinician with eclectic tendencies.
Ooh, I like that. That sounds very fancy.
Yeah. So cognitive behavioral therapy is my preferred modality. And so the things that respond to that best tend to be anxiety and depression. So it works pretty well. But honestly, I am about adapting to what my clients need. So I've done DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive processing therapy, lots of different therapies, all the letter T's that are out there.
Got it. No, God, you're so wonderful. Okay, so then let's get to, now that we only have 30 minutes left, let's get to the heart of the matter of what we were going to talk about. And I have a feeling you're going to come back to talk about this more because we're just like going. Okay, Sarah, I'm going to get to your question in a moment, I promise, because I want to get to this topic. So the topic is, what exactly in video games, so video games are good or bad for your mental health, and that's all fine and dandy, but there's quite a few things in video games that make mental health, like they themselves affect mental health in a poor way, but not in the way that you would think, right? And that's a focus that you have. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have a research focus in the representation of mental health and mental illness in games. I think it's super important for a lot of different reasons. One, because it's already a stigmatized population. So why are we continuing to stigmatize it? And the vast majority of media representations, the person who is being represented is most of the time is violent, most of the time the most extreme ends of any kind of spectrum. And so it really reinforces the stereotypes around the mentally ill or persons with mental illness, being aggressive, violent, unpredictable, unable to hold a job, either like needing to be rescued or being the villain. And those kinds of stats, the research on it in video games is like non-existent. When I did my first study, I think I had 5 articles and 3 of them were from like Kotaku. So it's still pretty new, but so far it does seem to be paralleling what we see in like television and film around representation.
Got it.
And particularly problematic because, we were talking about violence earlier, and we're taught from when we're very, very tiny babies that, you don't hit, don't bite, be nice to your friends, don't tackle them like my son does. We're taught those norms. And so when we see something like that in a Grand Theft Auto or a whatever, we have a foundation for what is socially appropriate and what is not.
Sure.
When we watch that, we know that we're not supposed to kung fu punch somebody in the face. Like, we're taught that typically. Yeah, sometimes. Because we don't talk about mental health and we don't talk about mental illness, like, ever. So much that the number one public resource about mental health is literally media, like mass media, which is, again, problematic because of all the negative representations. But to circle back, sorry, I get really into this.
Please don't ever apologize. Getting into this is why I hired you, why I have you on. I did not hire her, you guys. If I
invited, I'll take invited.
Invited is the word. I was like, wait, I didn't pay you, so I can't say hired. No. Oh my gosh. Yeah, choo choo is right. So that girl, Bright, we have a command in chat. That's !train, and it goes choo choo. And because I go off topic so often because I get really excited about something, so you are in good hands. This is the place to be doing what you're doing. Go ahead, please.
Okay. But yeah, because we don't have a foundation for reference, what we see in our media, especially in our games, it may be the only contact that someone's had around mental health issues, at least that they're aware of. And so if all they're seeing, and they're consistently seeing the same representation, someone who's violent, someone who's aggressive, someone who's unpredictable, someone who's the villain, and they have nothing to compare it to, then you can't really blame people for like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's just the way it is.
Right.
It's a little bit weird when you think about, oh, the homicidal maniac. Yes, that's bad. Mm-hmm. But how many people think critically about the fact that so many horror games take place in insane asylums?
Right.
Most people that it never clicks that using a psychiatric hospital is literally shorthand for game designers and film people and whatnot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, be afraid. Mm-hmm. Something bad is going to happen because, again, my hashtag, have you ever had your character wake up in a mental hospital and had something good happen to them? The answer is no, because it is such a trope and it's so ingrained. One, we don't even see it. And two, it's a nonverbal way to clue the player that something bad is going to happen. It's just so ingrained in our understanding that most of the time we don't even recognize it.
Is it partly to blame just the fact that a lot of mental health and mental institutions were closed and now they're abandoned and nothing's happening with those buildings, and so it's an easy thing to put, but why can't it be a haunted house? Why can't it be a haunted anything?
And that's the tough thing, is that there are plenty of psychiatric institutions that have been renovated. They have been updated. Like your modern day psychiatric institution looks like an office building. Mm-hmm. They're usually bright and well lit. And yeah, there are the older asylums, like Town of Light takes place in a historically real asylum in Italy. Yes, Italy.
Oh boy. Okay.
And it's they rebuilt it from the ground up. And so it's really interesting in that component. And I don't ever want to shy away from the fact that traditionally the human race has been really horrible to people who are different, whether it's mental health, whether it's ability, whether it's cognitive, whatever it is. It's not all rainbows and kittens by any means.
But this isn't historical representation. It's one thing to say oh, let's not shy away from the, it's one thing to say oh, let's not pretend our founding fathers did not own slaves, right? Let's not pretend that. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying do not use then that as a background to be and now you're scared. That's the misconnection.
Yeah, and Cherry Ray has a really great talk that she's done about, how many times do you see a wheelchair in a horror game? And it's like a clue that something scary is going to happen. Yeah. And again, just more of that symbolic, rhetorical shorthand for getting at these cultural norms. And again, I see some comments in there. I think it's Whitey.
Yeah, Whitey Gamer's fantastic. Yeah, he always has good comments.
I want to be super, super clear. I'm not blaming video games, and I'm not saying anything like that. I think video games are more reflective of the cultural norms that we had. Because if as a society we're we should treat people with mental health issues with respect by giving them health care and not stigmatizing them, then guess what? People wouldn't, if someone would pick up a game that has an asylum in it and go, oh, yuck. The same way you would do something if a game came out with I don't know, blackface or something that we would find offensive because it stigmatizes an entire group of people.
Right.
So yeah, I don't blame games at all, because games are just a reflection of the larger social milieu that we have. And so if we're seeing problems there, then guess what? Those are the same problems we have in society writ large. But games are just the medium in which we are expressing ourselves in the 21st century. And so that's where it's coming up.
That's a very good point. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm making a note of the time in which you made this brilliant point for no reason at all. So what kind of stereotypes did they end up perpetuating? Like, do you have examples of characters that you're like, these are really bad, like really bad?
I mean, the Homicidal Maniac is a really good place to start. You got your Voss Montenegro, you've got your Sandra Cohen, you've got your Nolan Ross, Dead Space 2 guy, who's literally wearing a straitjacket. I don't understand. We haven't used straitjackets in like 40 or 50 years, and that game is set in the future. So why? I don't know why there's a space
restrained straitjacket.
Yeah, I don't get it. And those are like Kefka. Kefka is like the pinnacle of a character who their entire motivation hinges upon the fact that they are quote unquote insane or crazy. But then you also see smaller representations like the psychos in Borderland. They are literally called psychos.
Right. Why can't they just be bad guys? And this is I believe that this also perpetuates then this connection that people have made that violent people equals mentally ill people. Yeah, that's one and the same. And it's been very hard because people will come in frequently, especially after a mass shooting, which is more often than it should be, obviously. And they'll say, like, well, how could you say that somebody who could go and commit that kind of atrocity would not have a mental illness? And I'm like, well, there's plenty of reasons why they wouldn't, but you were not taught to connect them with anything else. You were taught somebody who kills people must have a mental disorder, and that it's very hard to disconnect that.
Yeah, and it's always important, and maybe this will be helpful for, hopefully there won't be a next time, but it's America,
somebody will come in and ask regardless of what's going on, so yes.
Okay. But just because someone's mentally unwell does not mean they have a mental illness. Racism is not a mental illness.
Oh, that's a very good way to put it. Mm-hmm.
I can also reassure you that in all 1,200 pages of the DSM, there is not one single symptom called asshole.
Right.
Like, even in psychopathic personality disorder, asshole is not a criteria.
If someone's a douchebag, they must be. They have douchebag syndrome. Yes.
Yeah, sexism, racism, bigotry, like all of that doesn't mean you have a mental illness.
Right.
And if you can go out and do that, you're not mentally well. That doesn't mean that you are mentally ill.
Everybody remembers this? Because we're gonna mention that. Because my chat will remember stuff like this, and then next person will come in and they'll be like, let me tell you.
Bam!
Yeah, we know facts. That's why I love my community. Yeah.
Yes.
Just because Mxiety uses a posh voice doesn't mean she's posh. Okay. You know what? I've had quite enough of this. Whitey Gamer says, yes, for sure. I wasn't saying that you were criticizing games at all. I was pointing out that by attacking games of the people, it's part of the stigma, yes. Just because you can correlate shootings with mental illness does not mean that the mental illness is what caused the shooting.
Can I give my favorite example?
Yeah.
Favorite example ever?
Yeah.
You should Google correlation between Nicolas Cage and drownings in a pool.
Am I actually Googling this right now?
I shit you not. It's like a 0.9. Like which for non-stat speak, it means they're almost identical. So like whenever a Nicolas Cage movie comes out, pool drownings go up. And when there are no Nicolas Cage movies, drownings go down. And it's almost exactly. And it's the idea that correlation is not causation. Is that just because things look like they go together doesn't mean that they do. Another one is that women on birth control have more toasters. That's another really strong correlation. But it's not that women with toasters are like hornier. It's that women who have the means to have birth control are typically in a place in their life where they can have a toaster, or they have the stability where a toaster would be something in their life.
I don't have a toaster. What do I do? I'm not part of the number. I have a toaster oven, but it's not a toaster.
That's fine.
It counts?
I think that counts.
Oh, thank goodness.
That counts.
Oh, okay. I thought it wasn't a woman for a second. I just had a whole gender identity crisis.
Correlation is not causation. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Seriously, look up the Nicolas Cage.
Wow. Well, recently they connected. I love this. They connected people who are on Facebook have more sex. Is that right? Or it was like people who post often on Facebook have more sex, something like that. But it was a headline, and I was like, you guys, correlation is not causation.
Yeah.
That is not what even. Yeah. Yeah.
Nope.
Sounds like someone who posts on Facebook would say, I have sex a lot. Okay, guys?
Did that come from Zuckerberg? Maybe
Zuckerberg.
Like compensating for something.
I have lots of sex.
Robots. Wow. Okay, so we got to robot sex within 45 minutes. I think that's pretty good that we took that long to get
impressive.
there.
Impressive. Yes. There are questions that the audience have asked that are relevant. So why don't we go to the audience, huh? That's a good time. It's terrifying to check Facebook. What? Because now you'll immediately have sex? As soon as you write a status on Facebook, bam, you'll be sex.
Bam.
It's just
Done.
what happens. She's got 3 She's such a player. Blissful, I'm gonna die.
I am 3 toasters deep in this ish. Science, yo.
I just don't want to see what family members of mine are active. Oh my god, you're like racist uncle who posts on Facebook all the time.
Nope. Where's Tetris? I need Tetris right now.
Just to get that image out of my head.
Oh, okay.
Oh, this is great. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. I'm serious. Okay, we're very serious. We're serious people
yes,
here.
doctor.
Yeah, you have a doctorate. I can pull this off. But you can't.
I'm a grown-up.
Yeah. Num-nums. Every video game is seen as bad to people who don't understand them. So yes, I can blow up someone's spaceship, but I can't help with hand-eye coordination, socialization, problem-solving, organization, etc., etc. That's a really interesting point. I can't see the rest of the question because this is it's amazing.
Well,
That's how
I will just do a rapid-fire response.
Yes, go.
There's actually research that shows that the more familiar you are with video games, the less you think they're detrimental to the well-being of others. And the older
that's another one. I'm sorry, that's another one that's like, no way. You mean people who actually know what's going on? That's basically what you just said.
Yeah. But science, there is data, good scientific, statistically accurate data to back that up.
That's beautiful. I'm trying to find the full question because it's not pulling. Oh, here we go. How can we, in a sense, educate people on the positive? What can we do to educate people on the positive aspects?
So when you go into psychology, every sentence starts with "it depends."
Right.
So I will start with "it depends." So there are some people who are never going to get it, and they are strident in their attempts, and they're just always going to see it as bad and evil. And I would not waste your time on them. Because they're gonna sea lion, they're gonna try to do the show of good faith, and they're not gonna there's nothing you could show them. There's no research that you would give them that would change their mind. So I would just say wipe them off the earth, metaphorically speaking, not like genocide.
Yeah. No.
Put them to the side.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. God, robot sex genocide. It's so good. I'm so glad you brought me on here.
This is what people miss out on. Can you imagine? People are like, ooh, mental health. I know that I want to talk about it. Bam, robot sex. You'll never see that coming unless you watch the full episode. Sorry, Go ahead.
Yep. Sorry, I'm trying to my own choo-choo just went off the track.
You're fine. So what can you say to people to help bring them around to video games?
So one of the most challenging things is I don't have a problem doing it because I drop the Dr. Professor Game Designer Kelli, and then people just listen to me typically.
Oh, you're like, I got a degree and I spent lots of money on knowing this.
Yes. So get yourself
hold on. I didn't deactivate the sound clips. I'm really sorry. Go ahead. Whitey Gamer, shame for using a sound clip in the middle of us. He used we have a sound clip of the goose honk from Goose Game, Untitled Goose Game. Yeah. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I don't even know where I was. Oh yeah, the positives. So one, get yourself a friend like me, and I'll hook you up. The other thing you can do is I often find it either shuts them up or it makes them come over to my side. It's just drop the pile of literature at their feet and go, bam, right there. You want it? Here's hundreds of pages of research.
Can you, as an ambassador for Take This, can you assist me in dropping piles of research in a centralized location that I can then use?
Yes. So I have this lovely dissertation that I wrote like 10 years ago. So the sources are a little dated. But yes, like there's so much out there. But also, you know, organizations like Take This or Mental Health America, or, you know, like APA is kind of because it's the APA, but institutions put
there was some tea drop just now. We're going to pretend it didn't happen, but okay.
Oh no, I'll say it again then. The APA is, you know, and it's a matter of, if the person is open to understanding, one of the best things you can do is actually get them to play with you. That is something that I recommend wholeheartedly.
That's what Dr. Bean said as well, actually. He's like, yeah, when you get parents to play with their kids and like actually sit down with the game, suddenly it's a different experience.
Well, it goes back to that research around the more you know about games, the less afraid you are of them.
Yeah.
And so, you know, one of the things I like to do is when I do trainings with clinicians is I always make sure I have games with me. I did a training at a high school for a bunch of social workers, and I brought in my Xbox. I brought in my Wii U because I'm old and I don't have a Switch. I had like 3 laptops set up with different games on them with controllers attached so that they could get the experience of what it's like to play. And so they had so much fun playing Mario Kart, and they were giggling and they were laughing. Awesome. And it's like, okay, so take that feeling that you have and imagine you're a teen. Go back to being a teenager in high school.
Being miserable.
Being miserable. Either you're a freshman and you're miserable, or you're a junior and you're going through testing, or you're a senior and you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. Like, and imagine having something that gave you that joy almost on demand. Do you get it now? And it tends to help a lot. So depending on the person, either drop the research at their feet and say, come back when you've read it, or engage them in play with you. And it doesn't have to be anything difficult. Like it could literally, you could remind them that, you know, guess what? A crossword puzzle is a game. Uno is a game. Solitaire is a game. I can guarantee you that whoever that is plays games at some point and enjoys the games that they play.
Right. Board games are games too. I have incited more violence over Monopoly than I have over any video game that I've played. Yeah, that is a flip the board game. I actually have flipped the board once in my life.
Did you know that Monopoly was originally called the landlord's game, and it was actually a game about the way that landlords take advantage of their tenants?
I mean, that's still what it is. It's just named differently.
Well, no, because Parker Brothers took it and turned it into capitalism.
Okay.
The landlord's game was about like how bad capitalism is.
Oh.
And Parker Brothers was like, nope.
Capitalism, good. Yeah. They just updated. Somebody told me that there's like an updated Monopoly version came out, and like you can rip your money and stuff. It's like a whole thing. Yeah. And it's like a bigger board.
There's a millennial edition.
Is that the one that I'm thinking about? Somebody recently was talking about it.
You can't buy a house, which as a millennial, I thought was really funny. Because you laugh to keep from crying.
Yeah. Yeah. Into your avocado toast, of course. Otherwise, you'd be able to buy the house. Yes. Oh my God. Num nums. Oh, the toaster that you have, right? You would put it in the toaster. Yes. My dad also once threw Monopoly into the fire. Oh my gosh.
That's probably where it belongs.
Yeah. Chunky nuts. I had a friendship nearly end playing Uno. Oh my gosh. You know, I first of all, I'm obsessed with Uno, and I Uno is my favorite game, and it bothers husband so much just because I will, every time we're like, what do you guys want to play? I'm like, Uno? He's like, no, we're not playing Uno. Like, he'll start the conversation with, we're not playing Uno.
I'll play Uno with you. We should play Uno on stream.
Oh my God. Yes. Why would I want a house when I can have an avocado? This is correct. This is millennial logic. Yes. Why would I want diamonds, napkins, Applebee's, any of those things? If I could have an avocado.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a Starbucks coffee.
Yeah, and a Starbucks coffee. Those are fine. Yeah. Oh my goodness. You guys are incredible. Shall we be the people who say board games cause violence and be the exact opposite? Oh my gosh. fabrics.
Well, let me tell you about the satanic panic of the 1980s when people were convinced that Dungeons and Dragons was responsible for recruiting good, upstanding Christian girls and boys into satanic cults.
Yeah.
Like legit. It was a huge deal. Dungeons and Dragons, harmless sorcery. There was investigators. There's a couple of books about it. Like it was a thing.
Yeah. I mean, there was a thing about Harry Potter also being a satanic. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Witchcraft.
Yeah. Well, it's literally witchcraft. Okay, you can't even argue with those people. They're so right.
Exactly.
All right, last question. Oh, Kelli, when can I have you? We're scheduling when you're coming back, like now. But okay, like maybe next week. I don't know. But relevant? Maybe. Probably not yet. What? Okay, so the last question was by Bliffle Splick. What are your opinions on the idea that the reason there's such a bad reputation for video games and cell phones and such may be because the out group of non-gamers, non-techs are reacting very negatively to not being able to connect to whole groups of people? Bliffle Splick, that's a great question.
I mean, it's one that goes so much beyond our current moment. This disconnect between one generation and the next, usually between parents and children, or that generational split. Again, that goes back to like Plato and Socrates of anytime there is a new technology, whether it was the pencil, the printing press, the radio, records, the phonograph, like it goes on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
There comes a point where there are those who know how to use it and those who don't.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't, they tend to be older. They tend to be the ones in power. And they tend to go, ugh, I don't get that. That's not what it was like when I was a kid. And so there's a lot of cognitive distortion going on where we tend to remember our childhood with like rosy lenses and then compare kids of today to the childhood that we had. And obviously that's not how time works. My son will grow up in a very different environment than I did. But I'm also really cognizant of, other than maybe the printing press or like fire, the invention of the internet has put a divide so enormous between a generation of parents and their kids. Like my parents told me, you can't have an email. And then I went and got one anyway when I was like 10 because they didn't know how to internet. And
I wasn't allowed to Facebook until I was 16. It was a big deal. I got one on my birthday, even though I had a MySpace before.
Yeah. And so like parents with my kid, we're going to have the talk, which will be about internet safety.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have those things, but I always try to empathize and think about what would it be like if my kid was on some technology that connected them to the world that I didn't understand? Like that could be very, very scary. And so it is ultimately about, well, one, there's the get off my lawn.
Mm-hmm.
The older you get, the less plastic your brain gets, the more resistant you are to change. It's just kind of a biological thing, not an excuse, but like there is a biological underpinning. And the second thing is just that technology is so much more rapid. I can't, like the other day I had somebody who tried to use Google Drive and they were having such a hard time like figuring everything out. And as I was sitting there, I realized, you know what? I started with Google Drive when it was just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then as it's gotten more complex, it's like aged with me. And so now it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was to go back and try and start fresh, it would be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to have empathy in that regard. So a lot of it comes down to a lack of information. And then the information that they do have, again, is coming from a mass media that gets clicks based on headlines like Fortnite more addictive than Coke, which is not true. For the record, it is not as addictive as Coke.
No. The correlation they made there was I read the piece I know you're talking about was that it hits the same part of your brain and exudes the same hormones, basically, that like cocaine, like anything that's pleasurable does.
Like eating a potato releases pleasure pleasure chemicals.
Right.
Playing a video game releases pleasure chemicals.
Hugs.
Hugs. Yeah, like
hugs are bad for you guys. Hugs make lots of brain stuff happen. You don't even want to hear it.
No, you don't. Like we're way beyond robot sex at that point if we're talking about hugs. But yeah, it's also interesting because these are the same people who are fine with alcohol and they are fine with cigarettes and they are fine with vaping. and they're probably fine with caffeine. Caffeine is so much closer to cocaine, like chemically speaking.
Yes.
So much more close.
Yes.
But we're like, no. Soda's on every corner. So.
Yeah. My gosh, you are absolutely incredible. Kelli, do you have any closing remarks for us? Does anybody have any last questions? I will take 2 questions. Chunky Nuts, thank you so much for the follow, Sunshine. Spuds and mayo, yum. Oh, dude, that sounds delicious, Aruni. Seriously. But yeah, if you guys have any last minute questions, yes. I am sorry we have to cut this interview shorter than normal, but I have a call about a panel. Which is what? Oh, no. Which is the only reason why. Rude.
Hi, puppy.
Rude. I don't know what he's borking about over there.
He's saying, "Pet me,
pet me, attention." Yeah, he didn't get attention for a whole 4 hours, so I don't know. He might melt into a puddle. Yeah,
that's like 28 hours in dog time.
In dog time, it is true. Flynn doing a bork. Yeah. You guys, please follow the heck out of Dr. Kelli Dunlap. People refer to you almost 2000. Thank you so much for the follow. People refer to you as Dr. Kelli. Is that right? Or not really?
As a psychologist, it depends. So typically, if I don't like someone, I make them call me Dr. Dunlap. Affectionate is Dr. Kelli. My students call me Dr. Professor Kelli.
Dr. Professor, I like that a lot.
Because they can.
Because reasons, yeah.
Typically, Kelli is fine, but yeah, it depends. Like PAX, it's Kelli. At the APA conference, it's Dr. Dunlap.
Sure. Well, this is what I always say to doctors when they're like, please call me by my first name. I'm like, that is very sweet of you, and I appreciate you giving me that respect, like you letting me know that I can have that courtesy. But you worked your ass off and spent a ton of money on a degree. Let me call you Dr. What's Your Name if I feel like calling you Dr. What's Your Name.
Okay, you can call me Dr. What's Your Name.
Specifically? All right, everybody. So that was Dr. What's Your Name. She's fantastic, as you guys can clearly tell. But seriously, follow her on all the social media. We will be back tomorrow with some Pokemon, so I hope to see you there. We are going to host somebody after the stream is over, so please do stick around for that. So what we like to say when we finish is, when the world feels dark. And, so our saying here is be the light. And we ask that our guests kind of complete the sentence and say be the light. So when the world is dark and bleak and we feel like nobody can give us the love and the care that we deserve, we go out there and we create that light. We create that brightness for somebody else. So if you don't mind letting everybody know to go out there and
be the light.
Fantastic. Bye, everybody. Wait around for the host. I love you. Mwah.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.